Today, I've got a few Halloween horror stories that'll make you think twice before going out after dark. In the story you're about to hear, a group of kids finds a massive house, one that simply wasn't there the day before. Before we start, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any terrifying stories. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to see how far these stories are reaching. That Halloween, all we wanted to do was stick to our usual routine. Roam the neighborhood in our costumes, knock on doors, score some candy, and head home late with our stomachs stuffed full of sugar. It was our last year doing this together. I was moving to a new city the next month. Ethan kept saying he was too old for kid stuff, and the whole group knew this was the end of an era. We met up at the corner by Noah's house, just like always. I went as a skeleton, the same costume I'd worn for the past 2 years. Ethan had on a Jason mask, and the rest of the crew threw together whatever they could. A witch hat, vampire fangs, a sheet with eye holes. There was Tyler, Max, Sarah, and Emily. 7 of us in total, all between 9 and 13. We started our rounds right after sunset. Most of the houses on Oak Ridge Drive already had their Halloween lights on. Glowing jack-o'-lanterns, fake spider webs draped over bushes, dangling figures on the porches. The weather was perfect. Clear sky, a crisp breeze, the scent of dry leaves in the air. We raced from house to house, comparing candy hauls, laughing, tripping over sidewalks. Laughter and spooky music spilled out from every direction. It wasn't until we reached the end of the street that things got weird. Noah suddenly stopped and pointed at a massive house looming at the curve, almost pressed up against the woods. "You guys remember this place?" he asked, his voice low. We all looked ahead. It was a Victorian house, one of those old ornate ones with 2 towers, a front porch, and intricately carved wooden window frames. The whole thing was decked out in orange lights, jack-o'-lanterns on the steps, ghostly figures swaying from the trees. But there was one problem. That house hadn't been there yesterday, and it wasn't just any house. It was the kind of place you couldn't miss. We'd grown up in that neighborhood, knew every inch of it. We played around there all the time. Sarah swore the spot was empty, just an overgrown vacant lot, and I remembered it the same way. "Where the heck did that come from?" Emily asked, gripping Tyler's arm. Max said what we were all thinking. "This doesn't make sense. No way a house that big got built overnight." We stood there staring. The windows glowed with a faint, flickering greenish light, like candlelight. And there was a strange smell in the air, something sweet mixed with mildew and the faint scent of burnt meat. Ethan was the first to step forward. "Dude, it's decorated. That means there's candy inside. Look at the size of that place. Probably the best candy on the block." Sarah tried to hold him back, but he shook her off. "I'll just knock. If no one answers, we'll leave." The wooden porch creaked under his feet. The rest of us stayed frozen on the sidewalk, watching in silence. It felt like a scene from a movie. Ethan climbed the steps slowly. The porch light was dim, but we could see the front door was slightly ajar. "This isn't right," Max whispered. "That house wasn't here yesterday. How did it just appear? And who turned on those lights?" The door swung open, silently, as if it had been waiting for him. The light inside was even dimmer, but we could make out a foyer with purple curtains and a black and orange striped rug. Emily screamed for him to come back, but Ethan just laughed and took another step. "You guys are such scaredy cats. I'm just grabbing some candy. I'll be right back." That's when it happened. Out of nowhere, a hand shot out from the side of the door. But it wasn't a normal hand. It was huge, hairy, with long, bony fingers and curved claws at the tips. It grabbed Ethan's arm with terrifying strength and yanked him inside in an instant. We heard the scream, a high, desperate sound that cut off abruptly, like someone had hit a mute button. After that, silence. Total silence. No crickets, no wind, nothing. The door closed slowly with a long creak and the light inside went out. We stood there, paralyzed, unable to move or speak. My legs shook. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of my throat. Sarah started crying. Max tugged at his shirt, trying to say something, but no words came out. It felt like the house was watching us. Tyler was the first to snap out of it. He ran up to the porch, shouted Ethan's name, and tried to force the door open. Locked. He pounded on it, but there was no answer. Then, without warning, the house started to fade, literally. Like each part of it was dissolving. First the lights, then the windows, the walls, and finally, the roof. When we blinked, all that was left was the empty lot we knew. Ethan was gone. Forever. We never told anyone what we saw that night. Not our parents, not the neighbors, not even the police when they asked. We just said Ethan ran into the woods and vanished. No one would have believed us anyway. Who would accept that a house appeared out of nowhere, pulled a kid inside, and then just disappeared? Days later, the police searched with dogs, helicopters, even divers scoured the nearest lake. Nothing, not a single trace. The group never got back together. We all went our separate ways. Sarah moved in with an aunt in another state. Max started having panic attacks and stopped going to school. Emily and Tyler moved away with their parents. And me? I tried to forget. For years, I avoided anything Halloween-related. No costumes, no parties, no carved pumpkins. But I never really forgot. 16 years passed. I was 30, living in a different neighborhood, working as an IT technician. Life was uneventful, dull. Then I got an invitation. Special Halloween reunion, Oak Ridge Drive, October 31st. Bring your memories. No sender, just that. Curious, I decided to go. I arrived in the late afternoon with a sliver of sunlight still in the sky. The street was different, quieter, emptier. Some houses had been remodeled, others were abandoned. There was no party, no music, no decorations, no neighbors chatting. Nothing. I parked near the curve and sat there for a while, staring at the spot where it all happened, and my heart stopped. The house was there, exactly the same. The same lights, the same ghostly figures, the same glowing jack-o'-lanterns. Like time had frozen, like it had stepped right out of a memory, or a nightmare. I sat in the car, staring, trying to figure out if my mind was playing tricks. But then I saw it. In the second-floor window, him, Ethan, still in the Jason mask. Same size, same haircut. He hadn't aged a day. He didn't look like a 30-year-old man. He looked like the same 12-year-old kid standing in the window staring right at me. I got out of the car on shaky legs. Every step felt like I was being pulled by an invisible force. My head spun. Part of me screamed to run, but another part wanted answers, needed to know what had happened. Why was he still there? How? I approached the house slowly, quietly. When I reached the gate, he smiled, but it wasn't a normal smile. Something was off about his face. His eyes looked hollow. His skin was too smooth, almost waxy. And the smile was stretched, like it had been carved into place. Then he spoke. His voice sounded muffled, like it was coming from deep inside a tunnel. Took you long enough. My body locked up. He kept staring at me. The others are coming. She wants to see them again. I took a step back. The ground felt icy. I looked around, searching for cameras, some explanation, anything to tell me this was a prank, a hallucination, a setup. But it was too real. "You want to come in, don't you?" he asked, his voice calm, like he was offering me a glass of water. On the porch, the door swung open on its own. Again, the same greenish light, the same eerie presence, the same smell of mildew and melted wax. Then, out of nowhere, voices. I turned and saw Max, Sarah, and Emily walking down the street. They all looked dazed. None of them spoke. None of them looked around. They just walked toward the house like they were being pulled. This wasn't a coincidence. No one had planned this. It was a summons, a calling. I looked back at the window. Ethan wasn't there anymore. Instead, I saw my own reflection. But it wasn't me as I am now. It was me at 12, dressed as a skeleton, standing there, smiling with the same hollow eyes, the same carved smile Ethan had worn moments before. Whatever was in that house, it was messing with us. As the door creaked open wider, that same childhood dread washed over me. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The same strange energy filled the air. The feeling that something was watching our every move, waiting for us to slip up. The house wanted more, and this time everyone had come back. The truth? I didn't go inside. I ran. Left the car behind, left the others. I just got out of there. I never looked back, never tried to understand. I just wanted to escape. Since that day, I've never returned to Oak Ridge Drive. Creepy, right? What did you think of that story? What score would you give it from 0 to 10? Drop your opinion down below. It's wild how sometimes fear shows up in places that shouldn't even exist, huh? But the worst kind of danger is the one standing right in front of us, pretending to be normal. Like in the next story, where a simple party invitation turns into the beginning of a nightmare. That night, all I had to do was keep walking. Ignore the guy, say no, but no, I had to be polite. And that's how it all started. It was my first college Halloween party. I was hyped, not just because I was a freshman, but because Sarah, the gorgeous girl from my anthropology class, had invited me personally. We barely talked, but she came up to my table in the dining hall and said there was a party at her cousin's place, off campus, and it'd be cool if I showed up. I wasn't sure if she was just being nice, but I said yes on the spot. On Saturday night, I grabbed a Bigfoot costume from a shop near my boarding house. Full body, furry, with a goofy rubber mask. Perfect. No one would recognize me, so I could actually let loose. I'd always been awkward at parties, but the idea of going incognito gave me this weird confidence, like I could be someone else for a few hours. The party was on a dead-end street lined with older houses. I walked about 15 minutes. On the way, cutting through a dimly lit alley, some guy called out to me. I stopped on instinct, even though my gut twisted. He was slumped against a wall, wrapped in a thick blanket, looking like he'd been living rough. Wild hair, patchy beard, and a stare that set me on edge right away. "Halloween party?" he asked, grinning with yellowed teeth. "Dressed as Bigfoot? Nice." I thought it was odd he knew. My mask was still in my hand, but I forced a tight smile. "Yeah, heading to a party nearby." "Which one?" he pressed, stepping closer. Every instinct screamed to bolt, but I had to be polite. "Just a friend's thing. Not sure if it's open." "Oh, it's open. Halloween's for everyone, right? We could go together. Friends stick together, don't they?" His smile didn't reach his eyes this time. It was forced, almost threatening. I took a step back. "Thanks, man, but I'm late. Gotta go." All right. Just tell me your name. Just the name, so I can say I was invited." That threw me. I laughed like he was joking. "Mark." He repeated it slowly, like he was tasting it. "Mark. Nice. Thanks, brother. See you there." I practically ran the rest of the way, kicking myself for engaging. The walk to the house was short, but it felt like I was being followed. I kept glancing back, but no one was there. Still, the feeling of being watched wouldn't shake. When I arrived, the place was decked out. Fake cobwebs, purple and orange lights, cardboard skeletons hanging everywhere. A group of costumed people smoked on the porch. I slipped inside, pulled on my mask, and blended in. Inside, the party was wild. Loud music, the smell of beer and cheap cologne. People laughing, dancing, drinking. It took me 5 minutes to spot Sarah, dressed as a vampire with heavy eyeliner. She recognized me instantly, even in the costume. "Bigfoot, what an honor," she teased, tugging my arm. "Where's your friend?" "My friend." "The guy you said you were bringing." My stomach dropped. I hadn't said that, but to play it cool, I lied. "Oh, he's probably running late." She laughed and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there, wondering if I was losing it, or if this was some crazy coincidence. Then I saw him, near the stairs. Jason Voorhees costume, hockey mask, clothes splattered with fake blood. But it was his posture, the way he tilted his head. It was the same guy from the alley. None of this made sense. How'd he get here first, and how did he know? I ducked into the crowd, pulled off my mask, and tried to act normal. I grabbed a beer from the kitchen and pretended I'd been there for hours. When I came back, Sarah rushed over. "Your friend's here," she said, grinning. "What?" "Jason. He said you invited him. Everyone thinks it's awesome. The room spun. Before I could react, someone screamed upstairs, a real desperate scream. The music cut out, every head turned. Another scream. Then footsteps. Suddenly, a guy came barreling down the stairs, naked, covered in something red. He tripped, hit the floor, and started screaming, "He's crazy, he's got a knife!" Behind him, the Jason-costumed guy appeared. But he wasn't playing anymore. He held a real knife, glinting under the colored lights. No one moved. I froze. Two bigger guys lunged at him, trying to disarm him. He fought back, shouting nonsense until they pinned him down and ripped off his mask. Just as I'd known, it was the same guy from the alley. Jason, maybe his real name. He locked eyes with me as he thrashed on the floor. "You invited me. You said I could come, said I was your friend." Every head turned to me. I could only stammer, I didn't. It was a misunderstanding." No one bought it. The cops showed up 30 minutes later. An ambulance took the injured guy away and they hauled the attacker off in cuffs. I gave my statement, tried to explain. But even to me, it sounded like a bad excuse. Did I use his name? Yes. Did I say he was my friend? Yes. Even if it wasn't true. And he used it. The next day, the partygoers' social media blew up with videos, comments, and theories. My name was everywhere. The messages flooded in. Did you know him? Did you bring him? How could you say he was your friend? By Monday, no one at school would look at me. Sarah blocked me everywhere. Even the professors gave me weird looks. I wasn't officially charged with anything, but the suspicion lingered. And the worst part, the guilt. If I'd just said no in that alley, if I hadn't lied about inviting someone, if I hadn't given him my name. It took weeks before I could sleep without waking up in a cold sweat. I still hear him saying I invited him, that we were friends. Sometimes I swear I see that mask in a crowd, that stare cutting through everything, and every Halloween I lock the door, turn off the lights, and pretend no one's home. Because now I know, not every guest comes to celebrate. Some come to collect on what they think they were promised. Weird, isn't it? It's terrifying how one lie, or one misunderstanding, can change everything in a matter of minutes. But sometimes, fear doesn't come from people. It comes from what we can't explain. The story you're about to hear shows what happens when someone realizes the past can recognize the present, even when it shouldn't. I'd walked down that street hundreds of times before, but that night, it felt different. I don't know if it was the flickering orange lights on the gates or the sweet smell in the air, but something pulled me toward it, like I'd been called. And the strangest part? My dog, Hope, led the way without even looking back. That Halloween, I must have been around 10 years old. I lived with my mom in a quiet, gated community, the kind with endless, identical streets. Every year, I'd go trick-or-treating in the same little witch costume, the sleeves getting shorter each time. The rules were always the same. Stick to the main streets, don't go inside anyone's house, and be back by 9. And I always followed them. But that year, something felt different. It wasn't exactly defiance, more like curiosity. There was one street tucked away between two empty lots where almost no one lived. I usually avoided it because it was poorly lit and always felt colder. But that night, it seemed too bright, as if every house had lit candles instead of light bulbs. Hope was already tugging at the leash, like she wanted to show me something. I followed, hesitant but trying to keep up the playful Halloween spirit. After all, it was just another street, right? Just another house for candy. But when we reached the end, the game was over. There was a house I'd never noticed before. It was simple, single story, with an old facade and peeling paint, but it was filled with lit candles. Real candles, the white wax kind, placed on the ground, on the windowsills, in iron holders, even inside glass jars. No lights were on, and yet, the house felt alive. There was the smell of baking cake, burning incense, and something else. Something slightly burnt, but not unpleasant. Just different. Before I could decide whether to ring the doorbell, the door creaked open on its own, and then the two women appeared. They were smiling. They wore long black dresses, not costumes, real clothes, elegant like they were from another time. Their hair was pinned up in a strange way I'd never seen before. And the scariest part? They knew my name. "Good evening, Helen," the first one said, her voice too sweet. "So glad you came back." Hope stood beside me, tail wagging. She didn't even bark. "And you too, Hope," the other woman said, crouching to pet her, always so excited. I froze. I couldn't speak. I'd never seen these women before. I'd never been to this house. And I'd definitely never told anyone my name on this street. "Come in for a moment, dear," the first woman said, stepping aside. "We've prepared something special for you." I shook my head. I didn't want to be rude, but something told me not to go inside. All right, she said, still smiling. "You can stay right there. Just wait a second." She disappeared inside and returned with a small basket of treats, old-fashioned caramel candies wrapped in twisted wax paper, homemade chocolates, star-shaped lollipops, things no one else in the neighborhood gave out. "Here you go. Some for you and some for Hope." In the basket, along with the candy, was a little bone-shaped biscuit wrapped in red paper. I took it with shaking hands, thanking them without meeting their eyes. "See you next year, Helen," they said together, still wearing that same strange smile. I turned and walked away, pulling Hope along, who seemed far too calm for my liking. When I looked back, the door was already closed, and the candles were going out one by one. When I got home, I hid the basket in the bathroom cabinet. I don't know why. I just didn't want my mom to see it. I ate 1 or 2 pieces that night, but the taste was bitter, almost minty, and it left my tongue numb. Hope devoured her biscuit in 1 bite and slept like a rock the rest of the night. The next day, I went back to see the house in daylight. I even convinced my mom to take a walk with me, making up an excuse about admiring the Halloween decorations. But when we got there, the street looked different. The house was still there, but it wasn't the same. It looked abandoned. The windows were broken, the door swollen, and the yard overgrown. No candles, no smells, no sign of the women. My mom said the house had been empty for years, that no one had lived there since before we moved in. She added, "That's probably why kids never trick or treat down here." I didn't say anything. I just held Hope's leash tighter. She seemed uneasy now, like she wanted to leave as soon as possible. Over the next few days, I tried to forget about it. I told myself it was just a prank, someone in costume, some kind of act. But something didn't add up. They knew my name. They knew Hope's name, and they said I came back every year. How? A year passed, life went on, and the next Halloween I went straight to that street. I took Hope with me, just like before. Deep down, I hoped it had all been real, no matter how strange. I wanted to see the candles, smell the scents, hear that voice say my name again. But when I arrived, there was only silence. The house was even more run down. Boards were nailed over the door. The windows were caked in dust. No signs of life, no candles, no smiles. I asked the neighbors if they'd seen anything unusual there the previous Halloween. No one knew a thing. An older man even said kids had avoided that house for years. "They say an old woman died in there alone," he told me. "Her body wasn't found for days. No one's wanted to live there since." I walked home with Hope quiet at my side. There was nothing to say, no way to explain it, but something told me it wasn't the last time. The basket of candy was still hidden in the back of the cabinet. The chocolates were untouched. No ants, no mold, as if time hadn't passed for them. Sometimes I'd open it just to look, to make sure I hadn't imagined it all. Now, as an adult, I still think about that night, about how real it all felt, about how much they knew, about the way they looked at me like I was someone important, or worse, like I was someone repeating. Because sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear their voices. "You come back every year, Helen, every year." And the worst part is, I remember things I never lived, standing there in the same costume, holding the same basket, trick-or-treating at that house. I remember Hope wagging her tail. I remember the candles, but I don't remember when. Maybe the question isn't how they knew who I was. Maybe the real question is, how many times have I been there without even knowing? Strange, right? how certain presences seem to know more about us than they should. But what if the danger comes from a real person? Someone who looks harmless, until it's too late. That's exactly what happens in the next story, a Halloween night that ended in a real tragedy. But before we continue, if you've made it this far, that's a good sign you're enjoying the video. So go ahead and hit the like button to let YouTube know you love this kind of content, and so you don't miss the next horror story. I still remember the sound of the siren that morning. It wasn't distant, muffled. It was right there, across the street. And deep down, even before I pulled back the curtain, I knew something was wrong. When I saw the body lying on the sidewalk, covered in a white sheet, my stomach twisted. It was Caleb, one of my best friends. And he had died right there, on my doorstep. The police called it poisoning, but I knew it was more than that. It started the night before, the night I decided for the first time in my life to take part in a Halloween prank. I grew up in one of those strict Christian families. My parents never let us dress up, let alone go trick-or-treating. Devil's work, they'd say. So I grew up thinking Halloween was just an excuse to get into trouble. But that year, I was 21, living on my own in a house with other students. My friends begged me to go out with them. It's just for fun, they said. And I believed them. The whole town felt alive. Streets packed with kids, houses lit up with jack-o'-lanterns and fake cobwebs. I even started to think it was kind of fun. There were 6 of us, me, Caleb, Sarah, Mike, Tyler, and his girlfriend June. All of us in last-minute costumes, plastic buckets in hand. We laughed at everything, took pictures, made fun of the people dressed as zombies and witches. Then Caleb got the idea to hit up a street farther out, where the houses were big and isolated. "That's where the good candy's at," he said, grinning. I didn't want to go. That street, Cedar Lane, was almost deserted. The trees blocked out the streetlights, and the houses looked like they belonged in another era. But the group insisted. When we reached the last house on the block, we saw a dark yard, covered in dead leaves and a porch with a dim light. An old man opened the door before we even knocked. He had a kind smile, a brown sweater, and a voice that was calm, almost sweet. "A visitor," he said, looking at each of us. "Haven't seen young folks around here in a long time." He offered a bowl of candies and chocolates wrapped in gold foil. They looked expensive. Sarah took one first, and the rest followed. I almost refused, but something about his gaze made me give in. He seemed so normal, so harmless. Before we left, the old man lightly touched my shoulder and said, "Be careful eating at midnight. Not all sweets are meant for those with pure souls." He chuckled softly, like it was a joke, but the sound stuck in my head the whole way home. When I got back, I put the candies on a shelf. I didn't want to eat any. His comment had unsettled me, but Caleb texted the group saying he was going to try one right away. "If I die, it's on you," he joked. The next morning, he was dead. The autopsy confirmed poisoning. The police found traces of a toxic substance in his stomach. Mike and Sarah ended up in the hospital with the same symptoms, but survived. June vanished that same morning. Tyler swore she'd left for work, but she never came back. The police started tracing the origin of the candies, and that's when everything unraveled. No brand, no manufacturing records. Just the gold wrappers, no logo. They retraced our steps, house by house, until they reached that address on Cedar Lane. But the old man was gone. The sheriff said the house looked abandoned for years. Dust everywhere, furniture covered in sheets and a strong smell of mildew. But the neighbors told a different story. They said the man had lived there for a long time but rarely came out. Sometimes they'd see him talking to himself in the garden. Other times they'd hear him humming nursery rhymes, even in the middle of the night. A few days later, the police got an anonymous tip. One of the officers went back to the house and this time broke into the basement. Down there they found 2 girls, bound, dirty, drugged. Their eyes were hollow, their hands shaking. One of them couldn't even speak. In the corner of the room there was a shelf full of glass jars. Inside each one was something that looked like sugar, but it wasn't. It was poison. a homemade mix of cyanide and honey. That image never left my mind. The old man used the same kind of candy to poison his victims and handed them out like Halloween treats. The girls said he did it every year to purify impure souls. One of them said he called it a tradition, that he believed he was cleansing the world. The whole town was in shock. The newspapers printed old photos of him, always with that calm smile, those pale eyes, that same false kindness. No one had ever suspected a thing. And I kept asking myself, how many people had fallen for this before us? I couldn't sleep after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Caleb smiling, holding a gold-wrapped candy, saying it was just a joke. The guilt ate at me. I was the one who'd insisted he come with me that night. I was the one who stayed silent when the old man creeped me out. I should have known. The old man was found 2 weeks later hiding in a cabin 30 miles outside of town. When the police raided it, he was sitting at a table with a bowl of candy in front of him and 2 cups of tea poured. On the other side of the table sat 2 porcelain dolls dressed in children's clothes. He was talking to them like they were alive. During the interrogation, he said the girls thanked him every time someone ate the candy, that the spirits fed on the purity of the young. He actually believed it, and in some sick way, he smiled the whole time. After everything came out, the house on Cedar Lane was demolished, but no one wanted to buy the land. They say at night, you can still hear children laughing in the air. Others swear they've smelled burnt candy coming from there, even years later. I never went back. I don't even go near that street. Since then, Halloween hasn't been just another holiday for me. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it has wrinkles, a gentle voice, and a bowl of candy in its hands. And every time someone offers me something in October, I refuse. Because I learned the hard way that not every gift comes from the living. Some say the old man died in prison. Others claim he disappeared before the trial. But every now and then, a similar story pops up in another town. Young people getting strange candies, people falling ill after the party. It could be a coincidence. Or maybe his tradition never really ended. Scary, huh? What did you think of that story? What score from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your thoughts down below. Some things age with you, but they never lose their grip. My grandfather Lewis carried a fear that didn't fade with time. It just changed shape. He was a man of rigid habits. He woke before dawn, cleaned his room with near religious devotion, and always prayed with a rosary clutched in his left hand. You could feel it in the air. This wasn't just faith. It was fear. Deep-rooted fear. The kind that reshapes your routine to keep the past from knocking on your door again. I only understood why after he died. Among his belongings, I found an old notebook tucked away in the back of a yellowed suitcase. The pages were filled with a mix of Italian, Latin, and frantic scribbles in French. What I managed to translate left me sick to my stomach for days. It was Louis's own account, written like a confession, something he'd never dared say out loud. A supernatural experience from his youth in the 1930s, inside a secret prison hidden in the Italian countryside. He was in his early 20s when he was assigned to work there. A place with no name, no signs, no public records, just a building tucked between mountains. It looked more like an abandoned monastery than a prison, but inside, there was no peace. Far from it. Louis described the atmosphere as soaked in bad energy. Lights flickered for no reason. Rats fled the deepest cells, and the veteran guards whispered things when they thought no one was listening. At first, he felt proud. It was a position of trust given to only a few. But that changed when he realized who they were locking up. Priests, musicians, professors, poets. None of them had been formally convicted. It was as if someone in a dark office in Rome decided who was a threat to the regime. And just like that, they vanished. Louis started losing sleep. He hid letters from the prisoners, tried to calm the most desperate ones. But everything felt like it was rotting fast. And then they brought in the nameless prisoner. He arrived on a rainy night, escorted by 3 armed soldiers. He didn't speak, didn't resist, just stared, and even that was unsettling. He was an ordinary-looking man, thin, with a short beard and dark eyes. But his gaze, Louis said it was like looking into a dirty mirror where you see the worst parts of yourself. They locked him in the most isolated cell in the south wing. He got no visitors, wrote nothing, ate almost nothing, and never slept. The guards started avoiding him. No one wanted to patrol that hallway. Slowly, the prison began to change. The most violent inmates grew worse. There were attacks in the mess hall. A cook lost his tongue in a sudden brutal assault. A priest was found dead with strange symbols carved into the wall in his own blood. No one could explain how it happened, or pretended not to know. In the nameless man's cell, the only thing he did was carve. Somehow he'd gotten his hands on a piece of dark, almost volcanic stone. With his nails and bits of metal he found, he slowly sculpted a humanoid figure. The features weren't clear. It was as if the shape was still revealing itself. But the strange thing was, the sculpture seemed alive. It grew. It changed. Louis said that every time he passed by, he noticed something new. First came the eyes, too deep, then the twisted arms as if broken, until one night he realized the figure's face was identical to his own. That nearly made him quit right then. But what came next was worse than anything he'd witnessed. On the night before Halloween, one of the prisoners, a young professor accused of distributing anti-fascist pamphlets, began screaming in the middle of the night. He claimed the stone man had spoken to him in his dreams, that something was coming, that they were all marked. They laughed at him. Hours later, the professor was found dead in his cell, his face smashed against the wall. No signs of struggle, as if he'd thrown himself against it with all his strength. On Halloween night, the prison turned into a war zone. Inmates howled, rattled their bars, chanted in unknown languages. Some tore out their own hair. Others cut their skin as if it were some kind of offering. The guards panicked. Some fled. Others tried to stop the riot with batons and gunfire. With no success. It was a bloodbath. Louis locked himself in the control room, listening to the screams echo through the halls. But the most terrifying thing was the silence coming from the nameless man's cell. Nothing. No sound. No movement. When the chaos finally ended the next morning, they checked the cell. The door was unlocked. The stone sculpture was gone. In the center of the cell, they found only a human heart, still beating, carefully placed on the filthy mattress. And on the walls, scratched with his own fingernails, were the Latin words, "The body was too much of a prison for me." Authorities arrived 2 days later. They examined the bodies, falsified reports, and arrested a few surviving guards as scapegoats. They declared the nameless prisoner had died in the riot, though no body matched his description. Louis tried to warn them, tried to explain what he'd seen, but he was threatened, silenced. He realized no one wanted the truth. Not even the priests called in to re-bless the place seemed at ease. They left pale without saying a word. That's when he decided to run. He deserted, crossed the border, and hid until he could get false papers to sail to the United States. There, he rebuilt his life. Married, had children, but never felt safe. Every Halloween, he locked himself in his room, hung crucifixes on the windows, prayed compulsively, avoided touching dark stone, even if he couldn't explain why, carried holy water in his jacket pocket, even on sunny days. After reading all this, I started looking at his things differently. The rosary hanging by the bed, the vials of holy water in the drawer, the Bible pages marked with notes. And I began to wonder, did the nameless man really disappear? Or did he, in some way, escape his body and spread across the world? On every Halloween, in every place where evil surfaces without reason, is he the one behind it? It's hard to tell what's worse, the evil that grows inside us or the one that never dies. It just changes form. If you've made it all the way here, comment prisoner, so I know you stayed with me till the end. And don't forget to subscribe. There are always stories here that mess with what we believe is real. Leave a like so I know you're into this kind of horror. And there's another video right here with more dark stories waiting for you. Click it and keep going with me over there.